Hello everyone, and so for this videos we'll be taking a slight segue and be talking about archetypes as is described in the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And it's just a visual hint of what I am trying to put across for this the book and how it talks about it. It's a bit it's slightly conceptual, so try and try and bear with me. But if we can imagine, and my page is a bit small, but it's okay. If we can imagine, if we go inside and we, have a look at ourselves and the structures that exist inside ourselves, and if we can imagine boy psychology, or the structure of manhood, so to speak, and we simplify it as a triangle. Remember, it's just a simplification. It's it's not meant to be definitive. It's just an analogy for something. And if we imagine that we call this boy psychology, and we just generalize it as such, and we call this part here the boy in his fullness. And what I refer to is when a boy is, he's enjoying life. He's, dancing, he's playing, he's really enjoying life. And, many of us, we are fixated in this position. And, that's why we say, oh, it's great being just a grown-up kid, a boy in a man's body, and that kind of thing. It can be very liberating to remain in that state, and that's when we enjoy this state as much as we do, it can be difficult to be motivated to break out. However, the concept I want to put across is that evolution is an ongoing process. I think it is part of human nature that for fulfillment, there requires to be a certain level of growth and evolution to the next level, and which I'll use to kind of represent with this larger pyramid here, this larger triangle. And let's call this man psychology. So up here is the man in his fullness, and of course there's higher levels, but for the moment we'll use this as the primary representation of masculine. What was that damn word again? The word just popped out of my head. Archetype. Yeah, like the masculine archetype, and its representation, and primarily it's to show you these two ideas, how this action here, I'll just use another color, this action here is what we're trying to achieve, from the boy in his fullness to a man in his fullness here. And this process is called initiation. However, I think that in many cases we get stuck in this process, in this level here, that hasn't been addressed yet. And I think if we don't have this process, then a lot of problems can occur in later life. However, there's one more thing that needs to be recognized as well, and it is this motion here. This downward motion here. And this one is very interesting. If we think about it, this here, this is what we call shadow wounds. Now, these are the wounds that our parents give us when they shame us or they fuel us with negative energy. you know, that really puts a child down, where a child loses his self-esteem. It's not always the parents, but primarily it is the parents. In later life, in early adolescence, etc., then these shadow wounds can arise from poor treatment from peers, and I think we see that a lot from men, from young men around 12, 13-year olds, particularly at the time when they don't have much male guidance in their lives, and they act competitively, and without knowing much better, they compete by shoving other people down, their peers down, and I think you know what I'm talking about in our Western culture. However, there's something fascinating when we look at this upward arrow and this downward arrow, and we can substitute the word initiation with what is called a sacred wound. And really, this is the difference between boys and men. This is the real crux of what we are trying to do here. And really, it is vital for any kind of growth, be it in regarding men at least, is that there is a deep need for a kind of wound to evolve or to change. And the act of wounding is what I want to really emphasize here. A parent wounding their child has a lot of stigmas, because when we think of child wounds, we think of domestic violence and other shadow wounds that is in our society. But in a healthy relationship, in a healthy father-son relationship, at least, this sacred wound is where it's all at. To demonstrate this, in a hypothetical situation where a child steals a piece of candy because he likes the sweet taste and he just wants a quick fix, and the parent witnesses this and says to the child, "Don't do that." And at this particular moment, the parent is required to wound the child to teach him a lesson. And that, particularly in a father-son scenario, there is a decision between a shadow wound or a sacred wound. The sacred wound is when the parent teaches the child a lesson about life, about the importance of value and the importance of a dollar, and earning what you deserve. Whereas the shadow wound might be followed up with an act of shaming, or a smack on the back of the head, or anything like that. And really, it's not the lesson that comes across, but the shame that comes across, or the anger or the pain that comes across. And if there is a pattern of this that just follows the child throughout his life, and if people come into that child's life that reminds him or her of the particular parent, this can just really compound in itself. When I asked you to look at where you were deficient as a man, where you were still a boy, you may have been looking at this section here, but I really wanted you to go deep down and open up some of your shadow wounds. Where anger comes up, where shame comes up, where pain comes up, where you are insecure, where you feel fear in your life. Those are the real moments when we begin to question our manhood. And the problem is this thing here, this line. Let me just change the color so make it stand out a bit more. So I'll make it a white line to make it really discreet. Not discreet, to make it stand out. And that is that we shove it down this white line here, we push it down, and this action is what we call repression. I said in one of my earliest videos that the problem with men and women, well, women have been oppressed by men for thousands of years, and men on a hidden level have been repressed, and we've done a lot of harm to ourselves. It isn't apparent, unless we look at the wars that have been fought by men, and the harm that we've caused each other for thousands and thousands of years. And I think that this is what's happening. The problem with shadow wounds is that when we act with people, we act through our shadow. We act through these things that we have suppressed in our minds, but they come up at the opportune moments, and they can really take over us. In this way, this is the reason why this work is going to be very difficult, because I am asking you to look at yourself and look at where in your life do you struggle, particularly in an emotional level. I think men, particularly men who have not done this kind of work, find emotions difficult to handle, difficult to grasp, difficult to open. Robert Bly was the one who wrote, as we go down into our emotions, we feel a sudden feeling of grief. And I think this is because we bottle up these emotions quite a bit. It's just our nature as men. And these shadow wounds, this pain that we've been repressing, is the first thing that come up. So we've become very good at repressing this down. What happens when shadow wounds come to light is that as time goes by, these wounds just spiral out of control, and they'll become, they'll have two tiers here. They're both shadows, but they're related in a certain way. And if we just, draw a line here, and we call this side and this side, so we call this the active pole, and we call this passive. And the idea is that when we repress something, particularly if we repress it into our subconscious, I know I sound like a bloody shrink or nutcase here, but bear with me. If we look at behaviors and emotions when they begin to get pressed down at this level because of this repression that I was talking about, then when it emerges as an active or a passive pole. For example, when men who have a lot of shadow wounds, a lot of wounds that they are acting out, and they try to be men, and they try to be strong. And remember the last video I started off with the list of, the lawyer, the coach who ridicules his star players, the drug addicts, etc., etc. The active pole was the action, was the outward show of strength. And the passive pole is, inside his inner vulnerabilities. And it's easy to take notice of the active poles, but it's a touch more difficult to see the passive poles. And the challenge in yourself is to look at this active pole here, where you are overcompensating in life by trying too hard to act like a man, and think, where does that come from? Why am I acting this way? Why am I putting so much energy and looking into it? Just doing this so much. So, as I go through this chapter, I'll be talking about, you know, a lot of this orange box here. This is when we stay in boy psychology, and you know, how boy psychology, when it emerges out of us. This line here, I'll put this on top, you know, this line across, I mean. So when we are conscious of that we are a boy, it tends to be, you know, we love being a boy, and so we're very conscious of it. This area down here, all of this area, that is the serious work that I'm trying to put across. And I've been doing it for a couple of years now. Just a quick note that, you know, when a man's active and passive poles, it can spiral out of control and become sinister forms uh, of, you know, immaturity. So uh, they've actually grown tentacles, and you know, our negative habits have come and followed us, but they're still repressed. We act from them on an unconscious level. There's still a lot of pain and angst that we haven't addressed. You know, this is looking at this graph here. This will make more sense the more I go into it. You know, as I break it down, and particularly as I go through different elements of boy psychology. You know, specifically this orange triangle, and in future videos we'll talk about when that boy psychology emerges and actually turns into this thing here that has matured. So again, this part is what we're trying to go through, is our goal, and we're trying to address our shadow that we've repressed by looking at old wounds. If you have any questions, because I just realized how complicated I made this sound. I mean, it'll make more sense the further we go into it. And, you know, I invite you to come back and look at this video again. Um, because, yeah, didn't realize I could make something, you know, it is a pretty complicated topic. Okay, actually, in my very next video, I'll break down another thing. And we'll just talk, and then, you know, from then on, go on from there. Actually.